you.
Okay, next up, we are so excited to introduce to you Daniel Pink, The Power of Regret, How Looking Backward Moves Us Forward. Daniel Pink's books, oh, excuse me, just for 1 second. Of course, there's always a little bit of, hold on, sorry. There's always a little bit of technical stuff I have to do. Hold on a minute. Sorry. Sorry, Daniel. I'm coming. Okay, sorry. All right, sorry about that. Let me just quickly introduce you. Daniel Pink's books have helped readers and organizations around the world rethink how they live and operate. He is the author um, of the New York Times bestsellers A Whole New Mind, Drive, To Sell as Human, and When. His books have sold millions of copies, have been translated into 42 languages, and have won multiple awards. Daniel, we are so happy that you're here today. We have lots of questions, so let's get started talking to you. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you guys.
So, the power of regret, how looking backward moves us forward. This book, we were talking about it before we went live. Let's start right off with the fact that you put the word regret right in the title. I said I was going to talk to Daniel today about all my personal regrets and make this a really uncomfortable conversation for everyone, but I won't. Why don't you
Actually,
tell us a little bit about this book, how it came about, and mostly about maybe start off talking about the World Regret Survey that you did.
okay. Well, what I'm trying to do in this book is reclaim this emotion of regret because I think we've gotten it profoundly wrong. We have this reigning philosophy of no regrets, the idea that we should always be positive, that we should never look backward. And that is a bad idea. It's not a bad idea. Well, it's a bad idea philosophically, but it's not only philosophically, it's a bad idea. It's a completely unscientific idea. What 50 years of research tells us is that everybody has regrets. Everybody has regrets. The only people without regrets are 5-year-olds, people with brain damage, and sociopaths. The rest of us have regret. And the thing is regret is unpleasant. So the question is, if why are all of us experiencing unpleasantness when we know that we're programmed to seek pleasure rather than pain? There must be some larger purpose behind this emotion of regret, and that larger purpose is that it's useful. It helps us. It clarifies. It instructs. The problem is we've been fed a bill of goods that we should never have regrets. We should never look backward. And what we should, the real answer here is not to ignore our regrets and not to wallow in our regrets, but to think about them. And when we do that, there are an array of benefits.
I agree. I think it's interesting. I think it's interesting that this book came out um, at a moment that it did when, there's this whole cancel culture out there that kind of
Mm,
doesn't allow people to have regrets anymore.
mm,
I mean, it's kind of like we've kind of lost the ability, and you're right, a lot of people don't want to admit they have regrets, and some people, I don't want to jump around too much, but some people, instead of just admitting, yes, I regret something, they never learn from it. So as much as this book, when I first read it, I thought, oh no, is this going to make me have like, is this going to make me feel worse about all the regrets I have, or is it going to make you want to move forward? And it really does make you want to look forward. And I think the way you scientifically kind of um, break down the different kinds of regret, or the way you the regret reclaimed, the regret revealed, and the regret remade. Maybe you could just talk about those steps and how that actually does move you forward.
Sure, sure, sure. No, library people can totally tolerate a discussion about the structure of books because I actually I'll show you my view as a writer is I'm obsessed with structure when it comes to books, particularly certain kinds of nonfiction books because my books are nonfiction obviously, but they're not narrative nonfiction. It's not history. It's not a story that begins at the beginning and ends at the end. It's a book that is a about an idea. And for those kinds of books in particular, I think that structure is enormously important. I seriously am slightly obsessed with structure. And so this book has a very distinct structure, Kelly, that you mentioned. So the first part is regret reclaimed, where I'm basically trying to make the case that as I was saying earlier, that we've gotten it wrong. And the two big ideas there is that regret makes us human. Everybody has it. And regret makes us better. That if we reckon with it properly, there's a pile of evidence showing that it can help us make better decisions. It can help us be better strategists. It can help us become better negotiators. It can help us become better parents. It can help us become better problem solvers. It can help us find more meaning in our life. So I want to try to reclaim this profoundly misunderstood emotion. The second part is called regret revealed. And here, to answer one of your earlier questions, I wanted to understand, what do people regret? What do people regret? And when I and to answer that question, I did multiple pieces of research, but the one that you mentioned is something called the World Regret Survey, where in the hope of gathering a few hundred regrets that I could end up writing about and maybe interviewing people, I put up this thing called the World Regret Survey. Before I knew it, we had 15,000 regrets from over 100 countries. Just a crazy, really glorious, incredible collection of regrets. And what I discovered there is that, and we can come back to this, is that around the world, people kept expressing the same four regrets over and over and over and over again. And they weren't really about the domains of their life, a career regret, a health regret, a romance regret. They were about something more interesting going on one layer beneath that, kind of a hidden sort of architecture of motivation and aspiration beneath those regrets. So around, really, with sort of uncanny predictability, the same four regrets kept coming up over and over again. And then finally, part three is called regret remade, which is about, what does science tell us about how to not get hobbled by your regrets, but to enlist them as a force for moving forward. And what's frustrating to me is that no one ever teaches us how to deal with negative emotions. And so we're fed this message that we have to be relentlessly positive all the time, and that when we're not positive, there's something wrong with us, or that it's debilitating. So some of us ignore it, some of us wallow in it, others of us, medicalize it. And when in fact, if we actually just confront some of our negative emotions in a systematic way, we can turn them into forces for progress. So reclaimed, revealed, remade. That took me like 18 months to figure that out, but it was worth it.
You know what? You're right. Talking to a panel of librarians here, they are going to love the structure of this book, because it really does, literally, the book moves you forward. Like,
Oh,
you kind of understand where your regrets coming from, what to do about it, and then how to move out of it. And it's really wonderful. But I kept thinking that the World Regret Survey could have been a novel, a title of a novel, of like a bad dating life or something. I just love that so much.
yeah, that's funny. That's actually not a bad title for fiction.
But it's not fiction. So I love it. Was there any and I will say that this book is, I literally laughed out loud so many times,
Hmm.
and then I found myself crying a lot, which I'm sure you probably felt the same way when you were going through all the stories that people were telling you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's some very
Um,
moving stories there, and I think what's interesting about it, and at a broader level, Kelly, is it there. We're at this point, we have 17. Oh, we're actually, we'll probably hit 18,000 this week in the number of regrets that we have. So you have 18,000 people sharing their regrets with a complete stranger. Huh. I think people might want to talk about this. I
yes,
think that the idea that we put this taboo on regret, oh my God, don't talk about it, don't admit it, is so profoundly unhealthy. And the willingness of people to disclose, to talk about it, to try to make sense of it, is, I think, really is telling us something. And the survey is still up there. It's worldregretsurvey.com. And assuming that our back end code is working today, you can even go onto there's a map on the worldregretsurvey.com that you can look at and say, what are the last 8 regrets submitted by people in Louisiana? What are the last 8 regrets submitted by people in Switzerland? And you can read through people's regrets. So, but again, what I'm trying, this word reclaim is actually really important, because I think that the concept of regret has been captured by enemy forces, and we need to reclaim it for the good side.
it's so true. And I will say, I will admit that sprinkled throughout the book, for people that haven't seen the book yet, are like stories from people that say, like, how male, 35, Texas, of what his biggest regret was, or one of his regrets were. And you partly read it thinking, oh, like kind of almost comparing your own regret against somebody
Interesting.
else's regret. And then you're like, okay, this isn't the way, this isn't useful. But it's interesting. So two more things I would like to
Yeah.
talk about is or at least is so what, the closed door regret, if you could talk
Mm.
about that for a minute. To talk about something that was a little hard in the book. Can you explain what that is and how did you find that was the hardest one to get people to see the positive part of?
That's an interesting question. So closed door regret is I'll give you this the story that I think exemplifies that. So there's a woman named Amy. She lives in Pasadena. She's in her 40s, and she had a childhood friend who she was very close to when she was younger. They stayed in contact as young women, but not as close as they were when they were kids. At one point, Amy heard that her friend had this pretty aggressive form of cancer, and she said, "Oh wow, it's like my childhood friend has this aggressive form of cancer. I still care about her. I should reach out to her." And Amy wanted to reach out, and she didn't reach out, and she wanted to reach out, and she didn't reach out, and she waited and waited and waited, and then sadly, when she did reach out, she called, and it turned out that the friend had passed away that morning. So this is a devastating thing. And you can't do anything about that regret, right? Like that door has closed. And that's very difficult for people to deal with. Now, what do you do in that situation? In certain kinds of regrets that we have, let's say we've mistreated somebody, we can make amends, we can apologize. I've got people who more people than you would actually ever want to hear from who have tattoos that say no regrets. But I also got a guy who had his no
That's
regrets
part of the
tattoo
book.
removed. And so, so you, but with some kinds of regrets, you can't, there's nothing she can do about that. And so it's going to hurt. Now, the question is, what do you do with that hurt? And for her, she said, okay, this stinks. I can't do anything about this, but the pain that I'm feeling here is telling me something. It's a signal, it's information, it's a lesson. And so what she did, Amy, is that sadly she had another friend subsequently who had a terrible illness. And this friend, she called, she texted, she visited, she kept in touch with. And that friend also sadly died. But Amy kept in touch, and she didn't have regrets about that. So it's really a case of when you feel that spear, that's a terrible thing to happen to a person. You feel that spear. What do you do with it? You can't blithely say, "Oh, no regrets. Always look forward. Nothing I can do about it. The door is closed." But you can't say, "Oh my God, I'm the worst person in the world. I did this terrible thing, or I made this terrible mistake, and there's nothing I can do about it because the door is closed." What you have to do is, it's really at a meta level. It's what do we do with negative? What are negative feelings for? They're not for ignoring, they're not for wallowing, they're for thinking. And so Amy properly, astutely, in a well-adjusted way said, "God, I feel terrible, but that terrible feeling is telling me something. It's a signal. What am I going to do with that signal?" And what she said is that signal is clarifying for me what's important, connecting with other people, and it's instructing me what to do when I'm in this situation again. Reach out.
Yeah, it's exactly true. And I think the survey itself, where there's tens of thousands and adding every day regrets, it gives people a reminder, okay, it's not just me. I'm not the only
Yeah.
one that's made mistakes. It's nice to know sometimes that, okay, I'm not the only one. You talk about that in the book, how talking about it with a friend, getting it out is actually a really important step in moving forward, just actually talking about it.
It's a very, very good point. So one of the things, one of the ways that we deal with it is in part to um, normalize it. And so the way I like to think about reckoning with these regrets is sort of inward, outward, forward. So inward is how do you view yourself in this regret? And I was very taken by the research. It's 20 years old now. It's been going on for 20 years, called in something called self-compassion. And with self-compassion, instead of lacerating yourself or like sort of in a very vacuous way boosting your self-esteem, you treat yourself with kindness rather than contempt. The way we talk to ourselves is often so cruel, so mean-spirited, so vicious. We would never talk to anybody else that way. And so We treat ourselves with kindness rather than contempt, but we also recognize that our mistakes are part of the human condition. I'll give you an example from my own life. I have some regrets, for a long time about not being kinder when I was younger. And I suddenly get all these thousands of regrets coming in, and I think, wow, I am totally not that special. There are a lot of people who have these kinds of regrets, and so that's the first step in doing it. And as you mentioned, Kelly, disclosure is really important. Disclosure is important, even if and disclosure outward disclosure is helpful, but even just writing about our regrets privately for 15 minutes a day for 3 consecutive days, that is a very useful exercise. And the reason is this: it's something, again, that librarians and writers can understand. Negative emotions in general are abstract and amorphous and blobby. When we take a negative emotion, which feels menacing because of its abstractness, because of its lack of form, when we write about it, we convert that blobbiness into concrete words, which are less fearsome. And that begins the sense-making process there. And so there's some very interesting work showing that, when you write about negative emotions, you can defang them, and that's a great thing to do. But you shouldn't write about your positive experiences. That when you write about your positive experience, you kind of drain some of the positiveness out of it. So if you're having positive experiences, don't try to explain it. Don't try to make sense of it. Just enjoy it. But with negative emotions, that conversion process from blobbiness to concreteness can make it less menacing. And these steps, and then we want to extract a lesson from it. And the way you extract a lesson from it is to take some distance from it. Even things like asking yourself, what would you tell your best friend to do in response to this regret? And so it's a very, very simple process to reckon with these negative emotions. The problem is that we don't teach ourselves. Nobody teaches us. And so what really bugs me is the number of young people in their teens and college age who are completely hobbled by their negative emotions because no one ever taught them how to deal with it.
Yeah, I love it. And especially as a parent, you're always trying to teach your kids, like, don't worry about it. Next time you'll do better or whatever. But it really is an important moment in your life when you can point out to somebody, okay, it's okay to have a regret. I think this book is empowering for this reason. I know you have to go soon. I'm going to ask you one more quick question, but I just want to say that it makes it where you literally does. Trust me, when you read this book, you're going to feel this way. It moves you through it. And I think it's a very important. And I can't believe there wasn't another book that jumped right out at me that was about regret. So I think it's so smart that you wrote about this. And especially right now, this is my last quick question for you. During COVID, do you feel that people had more time to not only reflect on their regrets? Do you think they have more regrets? You have that one sad regret in there about a man whose wife of
Mm.
62 years, he wishes that he would have kissed her more before she died of COVID. It was like heartbreaking. But do you think that COVID has brought out an awareness of people that they can admit this, or how do you think COVID has affected that? I know it's just been on everybody's minds.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think that it has made people more reflective
Mm.
because we've been forced into reflection. We've had the brakes of our life have been sort of pressed and slowed down, and inevitably we are reflecting more. What's more is that I actually think, this is my own pet theory, is that I think the fact that people are um, I think that the fact that human beings are conscious of their mortality shapes a lot of what we do. And I think it shapes some of these regrets about boldness, where people like, oh my God, if only I'd taken the chance because I don't want to waste my shot here. And I think that the pandemic has obviously raised the salience of mortality, which gets people reflecting and wanting to step up. I think that's part of what's fueling the Great Resignation. So I think it played a role. You know what? I want to actually ask a question that came up in the chat. Somebody mentioned something about a gratitude journal in terms of writing about positive experiences, and I think the gratitude journals are a little bit different. When we write about I'm talking about writing about positive experiences. So if you say something like, let me try to explain why I enjoyed having dinner with my family last night. That actually drains some of the positivity of it. If you simply say, I'm so grateful that I have this great, if you write in a gratitude journal, I'm so grateful that I have this family and that I'm around and healthy to talk to them and love them, that's perfectly healthy. It's when it gets to the sense making process, rather than, because I think that sort of expressing gratitude for something, expressing gratitude for a set of conditions is very helpful. Trying to explain positive, like why something is positive, actually does drain it. Trying to explain why something is negative defangs it. And so it's a really smart question, whoever asked that in the chat. But I do think that there is some kind of difference there. And I think more broadly on this other point is that, we should just be just in general talking about our regrets. And we've just gotten it so wrong, Kelly. We think that when we disclose our mistakes and our vulnerabilities, people will like us less. No, they like us more.
I really agree. It's really, really smart. It really is.
Yeah, and people want and people do want to talk about this. I think the really interesting question, sort of related to Victor's earlier presentation, is, you know, we're still having some trouble dealing with regrets writ large, sort of national regrets, cultural regrets, and things like that. I mean, I was really taken with his example of the jar of soil
Oh,
from Lynch. But I think that is a way at a national level to reckon with tragic mistakes and deep regrets. And we're sort of fighting that battle nationally, where you have sort of a philosophy that says, no, we never look back on America. We always are positive. We always are pointing forward. And I think if it's unhealthy at an individual level, it's also unhealthy at a national level. So maybe my hope is in this book is that it sparks some kind of conversation about how we can all live better and live better together.
I if a book ever would spark a conversation, it's this one, and I completely agree. And on a national level, it makes me think of, I remember one time having an argument with one of my children, and say at the end of the argument saying to him, "You know what? I was wrong." And he didn't even know what to say. He goes, "Did you just admit you were wrong?" And I said, "Yeah." And it literally like just changed the whole thing. So sometimes, like you said, like sometimes you think you're giving up power, but really it's just making you more human. And I think this book is perfect for book clubs. I think this book is perfect for families to read together, for friends. It's really, I'm not kidding. I
Thanks a
absolutely
lot,
just
Kelly.
think the
And we
world
are
of it.
to Dawn's question in the chat. We are working on. It's literally like on my desktop right now. We're working on a discussion guide
Oh, great.
for
Perfect.
for this book. And and again, anyway. So and can I just say one more thing?
Yes.
Just one thing about. Can I just say, like, just I do have to go, but I like talking to you guys. Um, just so I would not be a writer if it weren't for libraries. Period. All right. And the reason for that is this. So I grew up in Central Ohio. And as some of you might know, Central Ohio, in particular, Ohio in general, has a very good library system, in part because of the way the state finances libraries. The local jurisdictions are not always going cup in hand to local taxpayers to fund the library. There's some state funding of libraries. And so I lived walking distance from a public library. And my mother, who was a reader, would pile her kids in the back of the Chevy Impala and drive us down to downtown Columbus and like dump us out of the car and just get rid of us and say, "Listen, I'll see you guys at 3." And so as little kids, I would like a kid, I would just like wander around this giant cavernous library on Grant Avenue in Columbus, Ohio. And that's if I had grown up somewhere else without a robust public library system, I don't think I would have been a writer. So thank you, librarians.
Well, I don't think you could have ended any better. That's wonderful to hear. And thank you. I think this book is going to change a lot of people's lives and it's going to heal a lot of relationships. So we could not be happier that you joined us today. Thank you so much, Daniel.
What a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Sure. If you didn't have to leave, we'd be here for longer, much longer.
Thanks, you
Take
guys.
care. So thank you everybody for listening to that wonderful presentation. I know that for a fact that this book will get all of your readers talking. It really is a wonderful book for book clubs and for people to read on their own. And so that was really fun. And if he didn't have to leave, we could have asked him 1,000 more questions. So I'm sorry that we didn't have that much time. But wasn't that great, Miriam? You might be muted still. Are you? Oh, there you go.
Yeah, it was wonderful. And A- Anne Benton in the chat mentioned the Edith Piaf story, which is mentioned
Oh,
a couple of times. Really, it opens with that, and it's really incredible.
yes, that was so touching in itself, and it's true. Like if you're, if you're on your deathbed that young for very obvious reasons and you still are saying you have no regrets, like, are you sure you don't have any? And I think there's a lot of great life lessons to be learned and a lot of like healing if you can just admit it. Um, I there were so many regrets of people that said that they should have studied harder in college, and probably that should be one of my regrets, but that's probably one of my only not regrets. But it was really great. And honestly, just when you feel like you're gonna like cry too much, you start laughing, and then it's just very human. The whole book just makes you feel very connected to people. It really was wonderful. So we have a few more titles just to highlight for you, and then we will be finished. So, Miriam, do you want to talk about these titles?
Sure. We like you are celebrating Black History Month, and we have a breadth of new books that are coming out and also newly released, including Lift Every Voice, some novels here, as well as biographies.
Miriam, before I go to the next one, I will say that while we were talking to Victor on the before we were live, we were talking about wanting to do programming at that beautiful library, and we were trying to already think of which authors we could finagle to go there so we could go visit him in person. That library is stunning.
It
So
is. It's amazing.
yes, but we will, again, like I said, there's the tiny URL on the screen, but we will be sending all of these titles in the wrap up as well. And then another slide for further reading for psychology and personal growth. We have a couple of really great titles that just came out. Other than The Power of Regret, there's the new Brene Brown, the Susan Cain. And so we just hope that you will check these out as well. Thank you for joining us for our second year of the Library Lunch and Learn. It's always so wonderful. I feel like we learn something, we enjoy ourselves, and we get to spend time with all of you. So thank you again for being here today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Miriam. Have a great day, everybody. Our next episode is going to be April 14th. The link will be in the wrap-up report so you can sign up. Have a wonderful day.
Take care, everyone.